Welcome to Classical Education, a podcast for those who believe in rediscovering the art of asking questions, engaging in conversation, and attending to the ideas at the heart of well-ordered teaching and learning. I invite you to join me on a journey in pursuit of the true, the good, and the beautiful as a participant in the great conversation and listen to the many voices coming from the world of classical education. Today is part 2 of a series on phonics. And over the course of the years, I have had a lot of teachers and parents asking me about phonics curriculum. So I spent a lot of time with my colleagues when we worked at the University of Dallas researching the most popular phonics programs used in classical schools and homeschools. And over the course of about 6 months, myself and my team at the University of Dallas, we selected Spell to Write and Read. And since then, I have become a lot more familiar with the program that you're going to learn about today. And the purpose of both of these episodes is to help you make an educated decision in which program is the best fit for you. If you haven't listened to part 1 with our Spell to Write and Read trainers, please go back and listen to that so that you can make a well-informed decision on which phonics program is best for either your school or your homeschool. Both programs, I think, could be used in either setting. One lends itself a little more towards homeschooling and one a little more towards the classroom, simply because that's what they were created for. However, adaptations can be made either direction. So sit back and listen and enjoy today's episode, and I'm sure you will walk away feeling very equipped to make a choice between two of what I think are the best phonics programs on the market today. I have Dorothy and Melody here with me today. They are with Access Literacy, the creators of Literacy Essentials. This is a phonics-based curriculum that is a lovely curriculum, and I'm excited to share more about this with our listeners. So would you each take a moment to introduce yourselves and how you made a journey into the world of phonics?
My name's Dorothy Kardatzke, and I have made my entrance into teaching really in what has become known the science of reading in today's educationese back in 1997 when I was first trained and introduced to teaching reading through spelling and writing, and began teaching at that time in that way, and um, marveled at the what I saw going on in my classroom, and have continued to teach that way throughout my career. I'm now retired from the classroom. I have been teaching or training, I should say, um, using this kind of method since 2003, so for quite a while. Um, and then 5 years ago, I
Mhm.
guess we embarked on writing curriculum based on what we had learned from using similar curriculums and what we had also gained knowledge-wise just over the course of the time of using that information. I have a double major in deaf education and general education. So I've taught in both special education and general education classrooms. I went back to school and did post um, doctoral or post baccalaureate work in linguistics and language development, and then did additional hours in neuroanatomy at the Ohio State University. So um, I guess most of that to say I'm old. I've gone to school a lot and taught
Well,
for a
and it
long
sounds like
time.
you have a great love for language and learning, and that's beautiful. That's really beautiful. Melody, could you share a little bit about yourself too?
Yes, I kind of was part of that journey with Dorothy back to 1983. We were both the first two teachers in a new school. Our church was starting here in Columbus, and Dorothy brought in an Orton-based program, and so I spent 15, 20 years K1 working through teaching students with that approach, and I was really blown away with the progress that they were able to make. I also found the need for supplementing what we were doing with the research of Sally Shaywitz and overcoming dyslexia. So I became very interested in that because there was just something going on with that lower end that I wanted to figure out, and so implemented many of her suggestions and saw that that really was taking care of the amount of practice that those students needed, and saw great growth and could follow those students then as they went up to second, third, fourth grade. But um, I, I too, Dorothy and I, since we've known each other back then, we became part of the company Access Literacy in order to really put the things that we learned in the classroom into a curriculum that would really support teacher implementation and management of the pieces and really integrate the literacy strands. And so that has become our next step, is to really work to get this out to more teachers.
Oh, that's good. That's great. Well, I've heard a lot of good things about your training, and I've seen some of your materials, and I'm very impressed with the usability of it, the practical way that it's written for teachers. Some phonics programs I think are very confusing and don't need to be. And I'm very pleased with what I've seen from what you guys have created. Um,
Good.
I'd like to kind of start because your name is Access Literacy, Literacy Essentials. I'd love for us to just kind of dive into the definition of literacy, if you guys wouldn't mind defining that.
I think that is an important piece to define, because very often programs are billed as a phonics program or a reading program, and I think one of the hallmarks of the definition of literacy, even if you just look it up in the dictionary, is that someone is has the ability to not only read but to write. And along with the connotations of that word are an educated person, a thinking person, a person who can think well, read read with integrity what's being put before them, and then respond in writing to what has been what they have read, or express their ideas in writing as well. So I think literacy includes thinking, reading well, and writing well. And we, in particular, stuck with, rather than using the term reading in our curriculum, really wanted to emphasize that it is literacy. It is about reading and writing and thinking well and enabling young children and then adults and older children to have those skills, which are the heartbeat of of a democracy.
Hmm. Hmm. Would you add anything to that, Melody?
Well, I think the idea of integrating the strands of literacy throughout the program, in and out in that K2, is so important to build that going either way. It's just spelling is the opposite of reading, and reading is the opposite of spelling and writing. So um, that's what we're having to direct the teachers, how to help them lead the students back and forth through that process.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And because Literacy Essentials is also the journey from spelling to reading, we have a flow in our sequence from spell to read. So I know Dorothy can get into more of the details on that, but
Hmm. Yeah,
the,
so why don't you go ahead and get into the details, Dorothy?
um, well, so I think one of the issues is the term phonics, right? Because most people come to us because they're searching for phonics, a phonics program for their children. And we know and have known for a very long time that phonics is a superior approach to teaching reading. The research has just abundantly shown that. But a colleague had kept asking the question, what phonics, which phonics, and I think there's a lack of understanding that not all phonics is created equal,
Yeah.
right? And while phonics emphasizes the fact that letters represent sounds and sounds work together to create words, the way in which they present that information, and the completeness within which they present all of the information vary from program to program.
Yep, I've
And
seen that
so,
for sure. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. And so I would say for us, we start out with the fact that um, we even hesitate to use the word phonics. You must, because that's required. But I would rather use the word code, because if I say that we're teaching children the English code, most people will not create some kind of mental picture with that.
Hmm.
They will listen more carefully then and say, well, what does that mean? What is it to learn the English code? And so, as has been recommended by the research, the English code is taught starting with the sounds and then adding these are the symbols that represent those sounds, using all the 40 plus sounds of English, making sure they're all included, and making sure that we go beyond the 26 letters of the alphabet.
Hmm.
One of the primary issues with English as a code is that we don't have a nice one-to-one correspondence between the sounds we use, like b and t and d, and the letters that represent those sounds. We don't have that in English. And so it really demands that if we're going to make the code accessible to young children, we have to be very, very explicit about what we do with that difference and how the code has handled that.
Oh, good. So you brought up one of my questions, explicit. So
Hmm.
we've this is a big, huge buzzword all over the internet. If you Google what's the difference between explicit and implicit phonics, and it's actually very difficult to find a good answer online. And
Hmm.
whenever I have found some websites that say they are explicit phonics, I look at their program like, you actually aren't explicit phonics. So I'd like you to dive into what that means as well and what your program is doing.
So, as you are aware and have seen, that word explicit can be used if they teach any sound symbol
Hmm.
relationship. So, if
Hmm.
they explicitly teach that the letter A can represent the sound a, that would be considered having explicit phonics. And so once again, it goes back to what phonics, how much phonics.
Right.
Um, so even if they do some of it explicitly, they can also a program can claim to be an explicit phonics program, and in the same breath teach whole words
Hmm.
and teach word parts, teach families of words, teach all kinds of things that really are outside of how the English code works. So I agree with you that the term explicit can hide
Yeah.
things that are really going on, and I think and unfortunately, we don't not everybody has all that information. And I think if I were a parent and I was really wanting to understand better, I would read Diane McGinnis's book, Why Our Children Can't Read and What We Can Do About It. And she wrote it for parents because of all of the verbiage that's being used and misused, I guess,
Hmm.
helping parents be aware of what those differences are. If very few programs exist anymore that would be completely implicit, because after 2000, No Child Left Behind, some of the um, legislation that came out regarding that, if your program didn't teach explicit phonics, it wasn't going to be accepted.
Hmm.
So they all say it now.
Right.
Very,
Yeah, they
yeah,
do. And it's very confusing when you see
it's very
articles that say
confusing.
you should be teaching explicit phonics and you're like, well, what does that mean? Because
Yeah,
it's very gray when
yes,
you get into looking for it on the internet. And because in my mind, explicit phonics means you're going to introduce all the sounds that that phoneme can make at the same
right,
time. You're
right,
not just going to tell them A is for apple and not ever tell them that it's a ah, it's all 3
right.
sounds, right?
Yeah,
That
right,
it
right,
can make 3 sounds, right? So that's
right.
something that in my mind, that's important. And I know
Yes.
that your program does that, and that's one of the reasons I recommend it. Um, could you explain how, um, like a little bit more about the science of reading. You mentioned the science of reading, and I'd like to know a little more about what that means and what science of reading has influenced your program in the history of
Yeah.
phonics and literacy
Yeah.
research. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's somewhat unfortunate because I believe that we have known this information for a very long time. Um, a very long time. And it's just now that it's come to the light. And there have been some people that have done a really good job of pushing that forward and making it better understood. But all of that to say that information, some of that information has been around for quite a while. And the Orton-based family of programs, and there's a number of programs that come under that family of programs, those programs have had a much more robust, explicit approach to teaching phonics um, for a significant number of years, since the 40s and 50s. Um, So it's really only now that we've gotten the buzzword, the science of reading, and everybody's trying to catch up with, well, what does that mean? I think for us, we have spent a lot of time reading Diane McGinnis, who has done some of the best compilations of reading research, in my opinion. Louisa Moats, who has also done a great deal of research. Both of them have done their own research and then compiled research. Louisa Moats has been an early proponent of teaching from sound to print, starting out with sound to print rather than looking at a letter and then saying the sound, starting with the sound, because that's how language works. We hear the word before we try to put it into print. So the whole sound to print. And so I think both of those women and the research they've done and the work that they have done in the field of literacy has influenced us greatly, along with the Orton-based family of programs that we would say we are one of. Um, I think within that, um, Diane McGinnis um, has done a lot to articulate what we would not want to see, and so as well as this is what we would do because it serves our children well, and the research says that our children grow more with reading by doing these things. She also has identified things that are not helpful and in fact are hurtful and harmful
Hmm.
for children learning how to read. And three of those are no letter names in early literacy, because letter names aren't as helpful to reading and
Mm-mm.
spelling. No guessing, absolutely no guessing. You need to give them all the skills they need so that they have this heavy toolbox to help them understand and decode a word or encode a word, spell a word. And the third being, no sight words.
Right.
That, in teaching sight words, we've completely begun teaching children the way code does not work. And so uh, we've avoided all three of those.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Melody, do you have anything you want to add to that too?
I think that was pretty thorough, so I'll let Dorothy speak to that.
Yeah. Well, why don't you then walk us through some of the unique features of your curriculum compared with other, quote unquote phonics programs? I know that you've also worked with schools for many years and you guys both together were able to troubleshoot issues that help shape how you created literacy essentials. So maybe walk us through some of the components that make your program what it is. Before Melody shares about the unique features of Literacy Essentials, I want to take a quick break to invite you to our first online classical education conference. Every session will be recorded so you can come and go as needed. This conference is not only for home educators, classroom teachers, and school leaders, but it's also for parents. If you're a parent with a child in a classical school or you're considering classical education as a viable option, check out our conference. Featured speakers for this conference include 11 master teachers who are all on the beautiful teaching team, and collectively we are leading 16 sessions. And it's all online, so you can attend from the comfort of your own home. Teachers can earn up to 11 hours towards continuing education credit. And just to give you a teaser, one session is presented by our very own reading specialist, Sarah Schrag, who will be leading a session called Phonics Instruction, the Essentials, where she will discuss the ways in which Orton and Gillingham continued the work of Charlotte Mason with a systematic, multisensory approach to teaching children phonics. To read about all the presenters, the topics, and to see the complete conference schedule, visit my website, beautifulteaching.com. Now let's return to the conversation and hear what Melody has to say about the unique features of their program.
Well, I think it's interesting. We started with kindergarten, and so an interesting feature is this idea that the student must know where to put their pencil down on the paper to begin to make a letter. And I think so many programs just use a copy method instead of saying, okay, well, we've got to teach them the lines. Okay, so we have a margin line, we have a top baseline, we have a dotted line, and we have a baseline. So where do I touch the paper to make something like the sound that to write what symbolizes the sound a and ah. So actually to start that letter, we've got to go over a space and just below the dotted line and touch, and we've got a clock picture, a face, so they can see where 2 on the clock would be. So we don't just say, give you a picture of this letter, and now just kind of however you want to come about it, write that letter, copy it. And so I think that was kind of an interesting beginning point for our development of our curriculum. Is like you've got to break every single skill explicitly down to the very fine point so that you don't leave anything for guessing,
Mm-hmm.
even letter formation. So I think that is how we went about from step to step that critically. Like, so for the letter I, it also says E. So those 3 sounds are learned, but I'm going to touch the dotted line, but comfortably close to the margin. I'm not just going to start any place on the paper. So I think that is that idea right there is how you have to break up literacy and gradually build sound to print, sound to print, sound to print, all the way through the whole code, little by little, and you start working with what you have. So early on, you don't just, you've got to get it somehow where you're going from the grapheme to the sounds and you start building a word. And so then it's important at that point that the student understands, well, this a ah is no longer saying a ah, it's only going to say one thing in this word. And since this is when you're teaching syllables, this is a closed syllable, we're going to use the first sound. And so you have an there and you have a there, and they're going to blend and get the word at.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all started with, we have to learn a ah, we have to learn where it's going to start, and then we've got to put another letter next to it, and now we've got to say, okay, it's just going to have one sound, and now sound and blend it and read it. So the opposite is true then for spelling. We want to spell at, what sounds you hear, and they've got to pull at, and then they've got to be able to at. So it's interesting how assumptive we are when we're teaching students that I'm sure they'll know how to make this letter if I just show it to them. And there can be some very interesting outcomes when you aren't very explicit. So that's just an example of the very early stage of what we took then from step to step all the way into what a 3rd grader would need to know on the Greek and Latin side of how these spelling rules, the way English works is a little different when you get into those words that have 3, 4 syllables. And that's typically in other programs where students hit the wall. They've run out of being able to take pictures of words and memorize whole words, and now they don't have those skills. So I don't know if that's just kind of a general, that's how we started very explicitly.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's great. What would you add to that, Dorothy?
Um, I think that principle that we started with in kindergarten, as Melody was referring to, continues to build skill by skill, step by step, practice by practice. And because we are a direct instruction program, we are introducing skills, We're practicing them for a long time, and then we're assessing for mastery. And we are going from the students being accurate initially to then, once they're accurate, building fluency at each of these of these steps in literacy. So once the sound symbol relationship with 1 through 26 is developed and they begin reading in decodable or controlled texts. So once again, we're eliminating guessing. They're not encountering anything that they don't know and don't have the skills to read. And then continuing to build upon that. One of the things that I think is unique about our program, and Melody alluded to it earlier when she talked about the integration of the literacy strands. So we teach all of those strands of literacy in an integrated way. And I think that's very unique. So we teach grammar not for the sake of grammar. We teach grammar in K2 so that students, once they are fluent writing and spelling words, they also need to be fluent in how the semantics and syntax of a sentence works. What does a prepositional phrase mean? How does it impact the meaning of the picture that's created when I read this sentence? Or how do I use it if I'm trying to create a picture? The cat ran up the tree versus down the tree versus over the log versus any number of things. And so we very quickly integrate sentence writing in kindergarten through dictated sentences where the teacher's controlling the vocabulary initially, and she's controlling the sentences to practice the skills that we're focused on. It might be just subject and verb for a while, tenses of verbs, all of the kinds of things that go into fluent writing also go into reading comprehension. And so if a child starts out with writing, cats run, cats jump, cats do not fly, you know, and they create a mental picture from the sentence the teacher has dictated to them. We say, make that picture. Can you see that picture? Okay, now we're going to write it. Cats run. And they, with those two words, then are focused on, it starts with a capital. I have to begin my sentence with a capital. When my thought is finished, I end with an end mark. Very explicit instruction on sentences, subject and verb. What are they? What do they do? And then we begin to expand the sentence as well. We do that early because we're trying to lead them into reading. Prepositional phrases come up very early in reading. And so we want to make sure that they understand what a prepositional phrase does and how it impacts meaning. So anyway, our grammar is integrated from the very beginning, and the goal of that is to increase and improve and prepare them to read with comprehension.
Okay, that's wonderful. I know that you also do something similar to what I Spell to Write and Read does,
Mhm.
where they create their log books and they add words and they add to their rule lists and whatnot. Um, can you explain a little bit to our listeners what I'm talking about so they can understand what I'm? Because I don't know how to explain it very well, but I'm sure you do. And I don't think you call it a log. I know they call it a log, but I know you call it something different.
Do you want to do that, Melody?
No, go ahead, Dorothy.
Oh, um, so we call it a student orthography notebook.
Okay.
Um, and the goal is a set of graphic organizers that take the complex information about the English code and try to break it down into meaningful bytes,
Mhm.
meaningful bytes of information. Um, and the process of building those and then bringing words that they're learning how to spell back to those um, rules or phonograms or whatever the page is focused upon, the fact that they come back and they reference those pages, they add more words to those pages, they use those pages for writing, that creates, our goal in that is that those pages that are graphically organizing the code become cognitive
Hmm.
organization in their brain. And that over time, as they use them and reference them, um, that literally changes the way their brain is wired and how they think about English and how they think about words. Um, for us, the students in kindergarten do not use that. They use charts on the wall that are created by the teacher, same principles that they will see when they transition in first grade into the orthography notebook.
Ah, okay.
Um, they use the same book in first grade, second grade, the same, not the same book. They build a new book that is the same, first grade, second grade, and third grade with a brand new set of words every year.
Right. Okay.
Wow,
Yes.
these principles still apply. It's a new set of words. These words are now 4 syllables, but the principles still apply. And so our thought is that by the end of 4 years of working with the code and graphic organizers and over 2,200 words that are really explicitly taught and practiced, that by that time they will have a real intrinsic working knowledge, a toolbox of the code that would support them as they go forward in the upper elementary grades.
Okay. Yep. That's very helpful.
I have one thought on
Yeah.
the something our program offers is um, in our level 3 that's typically for third graders, can be used in fourth, fifth, or even adults. It is actually explicitly taking a student through. The teacher teaches lessons. It's 4 to 5 weeks, 90 minutes a day. So it's basically 100 pages of content that is been written for an older student starting orthography for the first year. And we have many new schools that have never, getting students who've never had any orthography, they end up in third grade class and they've missed what K1-2 has built. So our program does have that feature that's not always available in other curriculums, where you could take an older student, even a fifth grader or sixth grader, and take them through what they would need to get started. And then the teacher can work through that level 3 for that fifth grader in that first year to get in that Greek and Latin side. So
Ah,
I think that's a very important thing, as people, schools are trying to decide if they want to use the program. How are you going to try to catch up students who have not had this before?
yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's really good. That's good. How I know that since you've worked with a lot of teachers, I want to know how your information is organized to support teachers. I know that mostly you work with schools, and I know that you offer really great support for these schools. And I'd just like you to touch on, what do you see as the top needs that teachers have that you feel like your program has addressed and gives to them, so that if a school is listening and they're looking for a program,
Yeah.
what makes yours unique for teachers? I mean, we've heard a lot about for students. I want to hear a little bit
Yeah.
for teachers.
Yeah. So I think that it is unfortunate that colleges of education, by and large, in the past, and I would say even today, have not done a good job of teaching teachers how our language works, right? So,
I agree with you.
I, I mean, I
Yeah.
yes. So teachers come to our trainings in a school that's going to use this program, and they have very little background knowledge in what we are asking them to teach their students. And so literally, our training, the first 2 days, we just say, take your teacher hat off. Like, don't even think about what you're going to do in the classroom, because you need to learn the code yourself because you've
Mhm.
never had an opportunity to learn it. um, and then the last 2 days of the training focus on, put your teacher hat on. Now, here's what you do with your students. But all of that to say, we have worked really hard to include the content we know they don't get into the curriculum. And really, it was the bane of our existence as we wrote, because it was very difficult to place content and then say, okay, now here's what you're going to teach for this week, but you really need this big section of content before you jump into this. And so I think one of the things we um, are finding for teachers is they really need to come in as a learner, as a student themselves, and really be willing, because it is quite um, daunting
Hmm.
to take in this information quickly. And so they take it in training. And then our hope is that as they start reading and teaching through the teacher guide, they will come upon these pieces of content where it's a review. Okay, yes, I did hear them say that in training, but here is an opportunity for me to revisit it before I have to actually teach it. So we have included a lot of content within the manual, spaced out as it's needed. Um,
Oh,
Go
I
ahead.
see. Okay, so they go through the training, but then within the teacher guide itself, you're breaking all of what they learned up in the training into the spaces where they need it through the pacing
Yes,
guide through the year. Okay.
yes,
Okay.
yes, yes.
So they
And
remember. Oh, yeah, I remember that.
yes, yes, because it's just too much information to hold in 4 days and think
Right.
that you're going to be able to go back and plug it in. And some of it they won't use for a couple of months into their teaching, and then
Sure.
so we've really worked hard at that. But what that requires of teachers is the willingness to really prepare.
Sure.
And the art of teaching, I think, in the classical model, the art of teaching requires good preparation.
Yes.
You
Yes.
absolutely have to prepare to stand up and be able to deliver the content to your
Hmm.
students.
So that first year especially is going to be
Ah,
the one year that
yes,
requires
yes,
a lot more effort
yep,
for
yep.
the teacher.
Yep. Yes. And so we try to encourage them with, if you just really dig in this first year,
Yeah.
next year will look completely different for you.
Sure. That makes sense.
Um,
What would you add,
Good.
Melody?
I agree with Dorothy about the need for a teacher to be a learner. And I think we're cultivating a sense that it should just be easy. I should be able to just show up on Monday morning and kind of look at what I need to do and kind of do it without that preparation. So, I mean, I think we're seeing issues of literacy skills at the teacher level
Mm,
that has been years and years of this poor literacy development in our elementaries, high schools, colleges, and we're not seeing a lot. Well, we're seeing too much. Um, is the preparation lacking of the preparation because they actually could read our article, but they don't understand what they're reading. So, where is that coming from? So, I think the literacy level of the teachers, as we improve that, um, needs to be rigorous. So, I think reading skills are important and understand because our the way we've had to write the curriculum is more of a technical text. It's not like a novel that you could just
right.
kind of breeze through, and so you have to be very careful and mindful as you're reading,
yeah.
and that comes up against literacy skills. And we have found minimally literate teachers
Hmm.
trying to then read our manual and implement that in the classroom. We've actually had teachers say they were learning better literacy skills as they taught the program. So
Oh,
that's
that's
Yeah.
kind
great.
of
That's
Yeah.
a
great.
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
So,
I,
go ahead,
can I
Dorothy.
add just one more
Hmm.
thing? So I think another thing that we kind of hope we can instill and inspire in teachers is a love of words.
Mm,
Right, because, the first person that trained me, she was 85 years old when I first got trained when she trained me, and so she was just such a delightful woman and such a great model, for me. But one of the things, yes, she taught me all of the technical things I needed to know about the English code, but in doing that, she also just taught me to love the English language and to love words, and I think that if we and that's something that you can't really teach, it's caught, right? It's
yeah.
not taught. And so I think looking for teachers who can in their classroom build amongst their students this just love of words, and then students are unwilling to skip over a word in a text because they want to know that word. They want to own that word. They want to have a new word. And so I think we are looking for teachers who don't just look at this as, oh, I have to teach this many spelling words today, and I have to do this many dictated sentences, but we're looking at teachers who go, oh, what can I do with these words that will inspire students to want to write with them, that will make them fall in love with these words and writing these words and wanting more words in their
Hmm.
vocabulary.
Hmm. One other question I have regarding what you mentioned the lessons are 90 minutes. Is that true for kindergarten as well as third grade? You were mentioning the third grade 90-minute lessons, and can those lessons be broken up into different segments throughout the classroom time?
So the reality is that in K2, we say that students, or that within their schedule, they need 2 hours
Hmm.
for all of literacy. And our goal is that, in fact, it is broken up
Okay,
in what we call sessions. And we give examples to the teachers of what a day's worth of sessions would look like based on what they're teaching in a given week. And so those sessions run from 15 minutes. The longest session is about a half an hour, and that
okay,
would be in first and second grade, which would include a grammar and writing session.
sure.
The longer sessions are also maybe the practice of reading, where they're sitting with a partner and reading
Hmm.
together, sharing a book. But the general length of sessions ranges from 5 minutes to 15 minutes, depending on what you're
Sure.
doing within that
Because you
session.
could have one session with penmanship, another session
Absolutely.
with the drilling
Just holding the pencil,
the
like pick it up,
phonograms,
put
right?
it down.
Yeah, learning how to sit. Yeah, I get that.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Yes.
And then you have to do accommodations for the lefties.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And yeah, okay, that makes complete sense. I just wanted to clarify that because I didn't want
Yeah.
somebody to go, "Oh my goodness, 90 minutes is a long time," but I
Oh, yes.
assumed that you were breaking it up, and I just wanted to clarify that.
And I think when Mrs. Furno was talking about that, she was specifically talking about that introduction to orthography that we have in the third grade manual. And so we do say to a brand new school in third grade and up, your students have missed several years of orthography. We would like you to carve out 90 minutes within your day
Sure.
to teach this information quickly so that you can then go forward and teach words at
Yeah,
their
and
level.
90 minutes isn't really too much anyhow. It already meets half of the state standards for literacy in
Right.
I mean, in the Texas state with the TEKS, they have to have like 120 minutes of
Yep.
English, and this
Yep.
is all covered in the English
Yes. Yes.
standards. So,
Yes. Yep. And
yeah.
so in the third grade classrooms, that may mean, I
Hmm.
have to borrow from my grammar block at the very beginning of the year
Yeah.
for
So
15 minutes, or borrow,
you're
borrow, borrow.
pulling lots and
Yeah.
lots of different state requirements into,
Yep.
kind of, you could, because you've done such a great job at incorporating it, making it a unified, rather than it being broken down into all these little bite-sized
Silos. Yes.
requirements that the teachers have to, try to meet, especially if they're a charter school, they have to meet those
Yeah.
standards. And so this is great. I love that you've incorporated grammar and writing and read all of it. It's beautiful. I want to get a little bit into the professional development. You've shared some things about what that looks like, and I'd like to find out how you may serve homeschoolers, because I know that the curriculum is created more for classrooms, but as I understand, there are some homeschoolers that use it. Maybe you could give us a little bit of idea, our listeners an idea of, if they're a homeschooler and they're, considering your program, what does that look like for them?
Melody, do you want to start out with that
Um,
as a former
yes,
homeschool mom yourself?
I was a homeschool mom. Um, we have a training manual that takes you through the 4 days, and it can be done as an independent study. So while we're not currently offering support to homeschool parents, we're focusing right now strategically in the pilot stage on schools. A homeschool parent could work their way through the 4 days of content. We have trainer notes, and we have
Mhm.
ways to interact with the materials. We have videos on our website that show how to teach the phonograms, how to work on them, how to practice them. both reading them and spelling them, writing them, so that our website Access Literacy does have those videos of the phonograms. And a homeschool parent could train themselves using our training manual and the support videos to then work through the curriculum. Dorothy, you had some ideas about sometimes a homeschooler might want a more simplified model that doesn't include all the classroom management pieces.
Yeah, I think, our curriculum is clearly written for a classroom. And so as a homeschool family, you're weeding through um, some of the information that is clearly geared toward more children than
And
most.
most of us homeschoolers are used to doing that because for
Okay,
years
there
we've
you
been
go.
buying curricula. I
Yes.
mean, I know you know
Right.
what I'm talking about, Melody. I had to weed through and go, okay, this is for a classroom. I'm not doing that part. I get it.
Yeah, right.
We're used to
Right.
that.
Much
Yeah.
quicker when you don't have 25.
Yeah.
Right. But I think another lovely piece of our curriculum is that once students are out of the controlled texts, which for us um, in a classroom pace is by October, end of October in first grade, but it may be before that in a homeschool setting. But once they're out of the controlled texts, they have the toolbox they need to be an uncontrolled text. And there's no basal reader, there's no must use this reader. The parents then would have um, the freedom, and we give a list of 200 to 300 books that would be great for practice at differing levels. And then the parent is free to choose the literature that they want their child to be reading for reading practice. And I think that is a huge advantage. And then it doesn't interfere with the grammar or anything else that's going on in the program. That choice of literature, I think, is really valuable to a lot of families. Um, the other piece, so I love Wanda Sinceri's Spell to Write and Read. And I think her program is similar in so many ways to ours. And she's done a really lovely job of using a good set of sound symbol relationships and the spelling to read. Um, and the advantage is that she has written it for a homeschool
Hmm.
population. Um, but we have had a number of homeschool families use our program, and we do sell the student notebooks as individual copies. So you can, as a homeschool parent, you can order one notebook or two notebooks, whatever you need for your family. Um, yeah.
And if there's a training nearby where they live, is there an option for them to attend that at all?
Most of the schools that we work with, that we train with, we do say to them, if we have teachers who need to be trained from another school, two or three teachers or one teacher, are you open to including them into your training? And most schools are willing to do that. And I would say, that would be something that could be offered to a homeschool family as well. If you happen to be in an area or are willing to travel to a location where there is a 4-day training, the chances are that you would be able to um, work with that school
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
be included in that
So if a
training.
homeschooler were interested in finding out if there was some training, would they contact you and then you could put them in touch with the school near
Uh,
them?
yeah, I mean, we probably, our goal is we're just getting the trainings set for this coming summer.
Hmm.
Some are already in place, but others are yet to be in place. But we could at least send a sheet. Here are the trainings, here are the locations, here are the dates, and here's the school. And then a homeschool family could look at the list and
And
figure out
reach
if
out to the school. Okay, that makes complete
any
sense.
of them would work for them.
That makes great sense. Thank you. Now, you mentioned accessing some training videos, like to learn the sounds, etc. Are those videos available to the general public, or are they only for people once they've bought curriculum?
Nope, they're available to the general public on
Okay,
our
so I
website.
definitely am going to want a link to put that in the show notes.
Yep.
so that
And
we
right
if
now, it's only the teaching of the phonograms
yeah, but that'd be good
to
to put
learn the
in the show
phonograms.
notes just for
Yep.
people to look at and
Yep.
see. Um, and what type of support do you offer for parents with children who use your program at a classical school? This is a huge question because it's really important, especially when I heard you say we don't use basal readers. So, how do you combat that? Because I know that parents want those.
Um, so we have a tab on our website. It asks you when you get there, are you a parent, a teacher, or a leader? And so we do have a section for parents, and it contains um, a couple of letters to parents about particular um, questions that have come up often. And so there's information there. There's an FAQ, frequently asked questions. The phonogram videos are there as well for parents who are interested in learning the phonograms to support their students. But we really encourage parents to work with the school,
Mm,
right?
hmm
So if a
hmm
parent is going to email us about a specific question about a child or a teacher, we are going to send them back
That
to
makes
the
sense.
school because we think it's important for the administrators and the teachers to hear these questions and to wrestle with these questions, and for the school and the families to work through those
hmm hmm
questions.
Well, and I'm sure you both would agree that the number one thing parents can do is read to their children. Read aloud, read
Amen.
aloud, read, read, read. You
Amen.
can't stop preaching that. Like that's,
Amen.
there's so much research that if a child is read to
Yep.
frequently, often, all the time, they're going to be good readers, right? So that's
Absolutely.
the best thing any parent can do is just read, read, read all the
Yes.
time.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things that parents are up against with this program is that we're teaching orthography, and none of us grew up learning
No,
orthography or
yeah, that's
very
right.
right. And so, they're marking words and they're learning rules, and parents are like, "Help my child!" And we really tell the teachers, "This is on you. The
Yeah.
practice for this needs to be done at school. It needs to be covered by by the teacher, and the parents
Yes,
do not have a responsibility for that." And that's a big paradigm shift
it is.
because the words would go home on Monday. The parents drill their kids. How do you spell cat? CAT, CAT, CAT. And then they would take a test on Friday. And this is a completely different
It's not at
expect.
all the way we want our children to be learning.
Not
I
at
know
all.
exactly what you're talking. No drilling, parents. Just read to your children.
Yep.
Just enjoy books together. Get
Yep.
the fairy tales out and read
Yep.
to your kids. That's all you
Yep.
need to be doing.
Yep.
and
Absolutely.
and and that's a lot. There's so much research to
Yep.
support the importance of family literacy.
Yep. And
Um,
then once they're reading, let them read to you, share,
yes.
back and forth. Yeah.
Exactly. It's the best way. It's the best way. Well, this has been absolutely delightful, and we're going to put some links for information we talked about in the show notes. And I always end my podcast by asking my guest to let us know a quote that has had an impact on your life or a book that you wish you had read sooner in your life. So, who would like to go first?
I'll go first. So the author I'm turned on to as an adult was Gene Stratton Porter, who wrote
Oh,
Girl the
yes!
Limberlost,
I'm sorry. I love you
Freckles.
now. Like, I'm sorry.
And
I
like
don't
I
think I've
started,
ever reacted to anybody telling me I'm such a junkie. I'm a Gene Stratton Porter junkie. I have a whole bookshelf, two
me
copies
too.
of every book. I
Dorothy and
have
I
I
both.
have a vintage copy. A new. I'm sorry. I've never
Yes.
interrupted a listen a guest, but wow,
Uh,
that
so she had this incredible way of, in turn of the century 1900s, of
yes,
speaking for taking care of the environment, the
yes,
beauty of the earth, and how that reflects God's, his creativity. And her quote that I appreciate was, here it is: "There was a moment in my life when I felt so in the presence as I do now. I feel as if the Almighty were so real, so near that I could reach out and touch him as I could this wonderful work of his, if I dared." And she was talking about what's the beauty she was seeing, the butterflies or the moths emerging
yeah.
from
And
a
so now I'm crying. Like,
coconut or a
where? What?
cocoon,
Okay,
all of that.
Which book is that from, or where did?
That's from The Girl of the Limberlost.
Yeah, I should have known. I've read it like 3 times. Oh, I am so tickled that I
Well,
finally
kindred
got a
spirits
guest.
now.
No, right, exactly. I finally got a guest who loves Jean Stratton Porter as much as
Oh,
I do.
we
That's
Dorothy
both
does too.
we both love her. Oh my goodness.
oh, she's
I kind of
wonderful.
reread her. I read
Yes.
them all and then I read them over again.
Well, my favorite book by her is Michael O'Halloran.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And I need to reread it. That's the book that she was filming to make a movie
Yeah.
when she
Yeah.
Out
was
in
had her
California.
yeah, when she had her accident and passed
Yeah.
away. It was
Yeah.
that was I figured it must have been her favorite book too, or she wouldn't have been making it into a movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I need to reread it. I'm due for a reread. Now I'm gonna go after we get off, I'm gonna be going to my bookshelf and pulling a Porter book and reading
There
again.
you
Oh,
go.
I'm so sorry. Okay, your turn, Dorothy.
So she got to do the fun novel. Um, um, but in a professional sense, the book I wish that I had read earlier is Mortimer Adler's How to Read a Book.
Another great book. I love that one too.
Um, so, he says in his preface of it, um, without free minds, we cannot act like free men. I shall try to show you the art of reading well is intimately related to the art of thinking well, clearly, critically, freely. All books will become light in proportion as you find light in them. And so I wish I had read his book much earlier in my academic career than I did. But yeah, I think I love the fact that they've reprinted it in paperback
Yes.
and that I had to pay big bucks to get it out of print copy.
Oh,
But now you can get it. So
it is a very good book. I have, and I'm going to put this in the show notes, the PDF link to, I found just like literally a one-page explanation about how to read. Like if you're
mhm.
reading something that you don't understand, how you just read it and you just read it. That's all you do. It's a very simple one-page document that I give to teachers and say, if you think this novel that you're reading with your students is too hard, just hand out this piece of paper on how to read a book by Mortimer Adler and read it together with your students
Yeah,
and then dive into the hard book.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I will put a PDF to a link to that one little short one-page essay for teachers if anybody wants to print that for their students, because a lot of teachers, especially new to classical ed, feel like this book is too hard. I'm like, they can do it. You can do it. Just
Absolutely.
you dive into it and enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you. This was delightful, and I really appreciate having you on my show today.
Well, thank you
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Yes, thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening. You can get involved in a few ways. There's a Facebook page where we actively discuss the ideas around classical education. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/classical education. And if you want to help offset our production costs, you can support the podcast financially by going to www.classicaleducationpodcast.com/support. As the great artist and educator John Ruskin once said, well, my friends, the final result of the education I want you to give your children will be in a few words this. They will know what it is to see the sky. They will know what it is to breathe it. And they will know best of all what it is to behave under it as in the presence of a Father who is in heaven.